Hello, and welcome. My name is Stephanie Van Selten. Welcome to Ask a Nutritionist. In this webinar series, I will be answering some of the most common nutrition questions I get. So September is all about back to school. So this month, I'm going to be answering questions about childhood nutrition concerns. And for our very first webinar, we will be talking about picky eating tips for parents. This is a question I get asked about literally every single day. So I'm excited to dive into this topic with you. Now, first things I want to tell you a little bit about me. Like I mentioned, my name is Stephanie. I am a registered dietitian nutritionist based out of Voorhees, New Jersey. I've been a dietitian since 2015, and in 2018, I started my private practice. In my practice, I work with kids, adults, and families to improve their health, their relationship with food, and their well-being. I specialize in intuitive eating, disordered eating, and eating disorder recovery, as well as childhood nutrition concerns like picky eating or growth concerns. So, if you've ever thought about wanting to work with a dietitian for yourself or for your kid, please feel free to reach out and see how I might be able to help. I see folks virtually who live in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. But if you live in a different state, I'd be happy to point you in the right direction to find someone more local to you. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is, some of the causes that make our kids become picky eaters. And I hope that I am not the first person to tell you this, but you did not cause your kid to be a picky eater. It is not your fault. I don't care, what you ate when you were pregnant or what was the first food that you fed your baby. None of this is your fault. So you did not cause your child's picky eating. Picky eating is a very common part of childhood. I see it as a very natural part of childhood. And a typical pattern that I often observe is maybe your child was a very adventurous eater as a baby. They ate everything you gave them. They were so excited to try new foods. And then all of a sudden around 1.5, or 2 years old, they started to become more picky and refuse things. So it might be helpful to know that this is very common. It has a lot to do with sort of the general theme of toddlerhood, which is, independence and opinions. Toddlers, start to realize that they are their own person and they have their own thoughts or opinions. So if it's not their idea, they want nothing to do with it. Another thing to keep in mind about picky eating is that everyone has food preferences, and that's okay. Adults, we have our own preferences too, some more than others, and that's okay. We can be considerate of our kids' preferences while still helping them to explore new foods. And also at the end of the day, most of their kids meet their nutritional needs just fine. Your kid does not need to eat broccoli to be healthy. They do not need an apple a day to keep the doctor away. Our goal can help them to help them eat a wide variety of foods so that they have all their nutritional needs met, while still helping them to enjoy food, enjoy eating, and have a positive relationship with food and with their body. So now what I'm going to do is cover 3 expert tips to help your picky eater be a little bit more ready to try new foods. So my first tip for you, and you might have already been able to guess this, and it is to reduce the pressure on your kid to try new foods. Kids need to feel safe and secure to be ready to try new things. It is number one. By turning down the pressure, you can make meals feel more pleasant, and reduce the drama and the arguing that can come with it. And then eventually, maybe your kid will be feeling more comfortable and more ready to interact and try new foods. So, what I like to recommend is to practice this magic phrase: you don't have to eat it if you don't want to. This phrase is truly magical, and I'd encourage you to try it the next time you get a little bit of drama at the dinner table. So, I'll give you some examples. Let's say at dinner there's chicken on your kid's plate, and they say, I don't want chicken. You can say, okay, you don't have to eat it if you don't want to. You'll be able to feel the energy calming. Another example might be if your kid says, I don't want peas tonight. Okay, you don't have to eat it if you don't want to. And sometimes when that pressure gets turned down, they might just revisit that chicken or those peas later on in the meal. They might not, and that's okay too. But turning down the pressure gives them that space. It gives them that chance to kind of feel more comfortable and feel more in control of their eating. It's also helpful to remember, that we are playing the long game, and we recognize that, one bite of broccoli, one bite of chicken is not going to make a big difference in your kids' nutrition today. But giving them the space to try things when they're ready will help them to develop a positive relationship with food and be able to expand their variety of foods that they eat, so that as they grow up, they'll be much more happy and willing and able to incorporate new foods into their meals. So my second tip to help with picky eaters is to include your kid as much as possible in the process of shopping, prepping, planning, and cooking food. The more that kids are involved, the more empowered they will be to try new foods. Involving them in the process builds confidence and independence, and kids love being in control and being independent. So one thing to think about, since we're in kind of back to school season, is kids can really start to plan their own lunches early on. For a 2 or 3-year-old, giving them a choice between a few items when you pack their lunch is a great way to include them. You could say, hey, would you like banana or strawberries in your lunch today? Or would you like your sandwich cut into triangles or cut into squares today? Kids that are a little bit older, maybe preschool or elementary school, can start to take on a bigger role in planning their lunch. So you can sit down with them and talk about what's available, and then they can decide what day they want to eat the different options on. Maybe they'll want to have a sandwich on Monday, they'll want to have pizza on Tuesday, and so on. It's exciting for them. They love to kind of know what's coming down the road. And when they're choosing what's in their lunch, they're more likely to want to eat it. Another way to involve kids is with grocery shopping. You can invite your kids to help pick out items at the grocery store. You can ask them to perhaps pick out a new fruit or vegetable, or to look for something specific. You could play a game where you say, hey, could you pick out a fruit that starts with the letter P? Or can you find a vegetable that's purple? And kind of let them have fun with it, make it a little bit of a game. Older kids can look at the store circular or look at the labels on food to read and look for maybe foods that start with a certain letter or foods that cost a certain amount. You can involve some reading and math skills with that as well. And finally, involving your kids with age-appropriate cooking tasks is a wonderful way to involve them with food. And cooking really gives kids a positive experience with foods. We're not pressuring them to try the food while they're cooking, but we can help them make those good memories. So the littlest members of your family can be involved with stirring, whisking, chopping, or using a kid-safe knife. Older kids, with supervision, can use a cheese grater or a peeler or a microwave, perhaps. You could also ask your kid to help set the table, to pick out dips or dressings, or to season food with different spices, salt, pepper. Again, cooking is just, so much fun and a great way to involve them. So now I want to share with you my third tip for helping your picky eater. And this is, I would say, the most fun of all the tips. So let me show you. So my third tip, you might have guessed, is to invite your kids to play with their food. Get a little bit messy and really explore new foods with all of their senses. Play is just so important to the learning process for kids, and it helps them become more familiar with a food and, again, create those positive experiences. And, remember that we're not pressuring them to try food with play. We're just giving them an opportunity to explore it and experience it. So play, gives those kids positive experiences with food. And so then when they see it on their dinner plate or in their lunchbox, it's less scary and less foreign to them. It's really important to let your kid decide how they want to play with food. We might have our own idea of what would be fun, or we might hope that, if they play with this, that then they might want to try it. But we got to let them kind of take the wheel, and go in the direction that their imagination brings them. So a great play activity with food you see in the picture on the bottom of the screen is the celery art stamp. And so basically what you do is you take a whole celery stalk and you cut it off toward the bottom, and the stump kind of, you see, has this like beautiful design that your kid can paint and then stamp on a piece of paper, and it looks like a flower. It's awesome. Your kid might be totally into that. Your kid might take it in a totally different direction. Go with their flow. Again, like I mentioned, we don't want to pressure our kids to try the food. We don't want them to eat something just to please us. We want it to come from within. We want it to happen naturally. Also remember that play can occur outside of mealtime too. This is especially helpful for kids that are really anxious about trying new foods. Incorporating play totally separate from mealtime can help them feel more comfortable, because they know that there is not that expectation that they're going to be asked to eat the food. So I'll give you some other examples of some of my favorite ways to play with foods with kids. So long foods, like you see spaghetti in the picture on the top here, or things like green beans, pepper slices, these can become worms or snakes or mustaches or swords or unicorn horns. Dry foods like rice or dried beans or cereal are great to use with construction toys or with cars or trains. You can also get very artsy with your food and use condiments like ketchup or barbecue sauce to paint on a plate, or use something like frozen mixed vegetables to make a mosaic or make like a face on a plate too. And then also kids who like to play with dolls or stuffed animals, you can maybe use food scraps or like leafy food like pieces of lettuce or spinach, and they can feed their stuffies, or they can have a little tea party with their dolls. And again, just tap into your kids' imagination and let them, go wild with it. And our last topic for today is, I know that many families are really worried about their kids eating, and they're wondering when they should seek additional support from their pediatrician or from a dietitian or another specialist. And the first thing that I would say is that if you think that you would benefit from additional support, you should get it. Even if your kid is not having a nutrient deficiency or their growth is not affected, if it would give you peace of mind, help to lower your stress, or give you more confidence, then it's worth it. And most health insurance plans do cover visits with registered dietitians. Like I mentioned, I work with folks who live in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. If you live in other states, I would highly recommend the website Health Profs. I'll put a link to it. It's essentially an online directory for dietitians, so it's a great way to find someone more local to you. And so let me show you some situations where I would definitely encourage you to seek support from a pediatrician or from a dietitian. The first would be if your kid is not growing as expected, if they're falling off their growth curve for weight. So let's say up until age 5, they were maybe growing at the 70th percentile, but then by the time they got to age 8, they're maybe at the 50th or 40th percentile. They're not necessarily losing weight, because that would definitely be a red flag, but maybe they're just not growing or not gaining as much as we would expect from their growth curve. That would be a great time to talk with a dietitian or pediatrician, see if they're eating enough to meet their nutritional needs, and also to see if there would be any medical reasons that could be contributing to slower growth. Also, if your kid is eating fewer than 20 foods total, or if they've cut out an entire food group. So one food prepared 2 ways counts as 2 different foods. So let's say your kid will eat French fries and they'll eat mashed potatoes. That would be 2 different foods. So if they're eating less than 20 foods total, or let's say that there's not a single fruit that they'll eat, or there's not a single protein source that they'll eat, definitely would reach out to someone, because you can see, are they reaching their nutritional needs? And a dietitian is someone who could definitely help, prioritize including other foods to make sure that they're eating enough variety. You definitely want to check in with your pediatrician if your kiddo is regularly gagging, choking, or vomiting while eating. Similarly, if they are extremely distressed or anxious at meal times, it could be really helpful to talk with your pediatrician or dietitian, or a pediatric therapist would be a great resource as well. So I just want to thank you for joining today. This is the end of our webinar topic for today, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Please check out my website, where you'll be able to see all the other webinars that I've hosted. There's an archive of them, so you can watch them. You can also see upcoming webinar topics you can register for, and you can submit your questions to me so I can include your questions in upcoming webinar topics. So thank you so much for being here.